Good morning, CAC members and staff, and those that may be on Zoom or on the phone. Michelle, we'll go ahead and take roll.
Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark? I believe he's on, but was having technical difficulties. Ms. Brown? Mr. Harrell? Mr. Hopdahl?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Savage?
Here.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Rios?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Austin Tibbetts? Ms. Temple? Ms. Deming? Ms. Taylor? Ms. Dyer? I see her. Brittany, can you hear me? Okay, for the record, Brittany is on. Mr. Liba?
Good morning.
Good morning, thank you. Mr. Helm? And Ms. Fast, Mayor Fast?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Cryer? Mr. Cryer, can you hear me? I do see that he's logged on. Ms. Sharp? Mr. Hayworth? Mr. Ahmed? Mr. Ward?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Blank? Mr. O'Brien? Mr. Smith? Mr. Medeiros?
Here.
Thank you. Through the chair, we have a quorum to hold the meeting, and we are one member short in the environmental group to take action at this time.
Okay,
Good morning.
great. Thank you, Michelle.
Good morning. This is Britta. My volume's working now.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, if all members as well as the public will make sure that their electronic devices are off or put on mute so we don't have any transmissional difficulties, I'd appreciate that. And at this time, we'll go to item number 3, which is the minutes.
So through the chair, we'll need to table that item until we reach our quorum for action.
Perfect. If you'll just throw something at me when we get to that number, then we'll come back to it. Great, thank you. At this time, any item on the agenda, item number 4, the public at this time is made available for comments from the public on items that do not appear on the agenda at this time. And so anyone of the public may at this time, if either in the 3 locations or by phone or by Zoom, could make comments. Michelle, why don't we go to the north and then to the central and then the south?
Through the chair, we do not have, for the record, we do not have members of the public present in any of the regional offices.
Okay.
However, we do have members on Zoom, so would like to open it up for public comment on Zoom. If you'll please raise your hand if you'd like to speak. And through the chair, I see no indication of public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Michelle, can you hear me okay with my? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, thank you. At this time, any comments from the chair? No, I just want to thank the staff and everybody for helping to work on getting members to the CAC, new members to fill the alternates as well as the main. So again, I want to thank the staff for all of that work and efforts. So after that,
Through the chair, my apologies. It looks like Kelly Deming has joined, so we now have a quorum if you'd like to revisit item 3, the minutes.
Perfect. Why don't we do that? We'll go back up to item 3, which is the approval of the minutes for February 1st. We'll take a second. I'm sure everybody's had a chance to review, but why don't we go, we'll open it at this time to the CAC members if there's any comments from the North CAC on the minutes.
Through the chair, there are no CAC members present in the regional offices.
Okay. Great. So at this time, we'll go to the CAC members on Zoom or by phone. Is there any
The
of
only
the CAC members?
This is Dennis Medeiros. The only correction is just clerical. My name spelled incorrectly. With that, I have no other comments.
And through the chair, I'll get that corrected.
We'll get that taken care of immediately, young man. Thank you. Any other comments from CAC members in the central or I guess by Zoom, or if not, let's go to the public. Any public comments by Zoom or by phone?
And through the chair, I see no indication of public comments on this item.
Okay, at this time, I'll move to approve the minutes. Declare them. Okay, perfect. And we'll do that. And with the one change made for, okay, super. All right. Let's go to item number 6, the executive director. Mr. Samir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Cunha. Hello to all the CAC members. I just wanted to fill you in on a couple of things really quickly here this morning. Starting with our last board meeting, there are several items on the actual CAC agenda that are related or the same items that were discussed with our board. I just I'll defer those to the later agenda discussions on those. But there is one item from the last meeting I want to make sure the CAC was aware of, which is the really large set of grants that our board accepted for a couple of really innovative projects in 2 parts of the valley. One of them is in southern central Fresno for a 50 electric truck deployment project with PepsiCo and in partnership with a variety of different local organizations that are going to be partnering with us to deploy that 50 electric truck project. A lot of workforce development and outreach and education elements as well that are a part of that project. A very exciting, kind of cutting edge demonstration project. And the other project is up in Tracy in partnership with Albertsons at a warehouse to do some deployment, again, of 50 electric trucks in that case as well, in partnership with local organizations and educational institutions to do a lot of workforce development and training and outreach and education. So very exciting projects. They total $36 million in state funds to support those projects. There's actually matching funding even greater than the state funds that's going to be a part of that collective set of projects. So again, very exciting. We did some press releases and got quite a bit of attention last week coming out of the board action on this. I want to make sure the CAC was aware of that, and we'll keep you updated on those as well, just in terms of deployment of those trucks and some of the lessons that we hope to be able to learn as we move forward with some really new technology there. I also wanted to let you know that the residential wood burning curtailment that we have in place throughout the winter, that actually closed yesterday. So that's through the end of February. And we will be reporting on this at our board meeting, and we'll also come back to the CAC with some data, which we typically do every year at the conclusion of the winter season residential wood burning strategy, wood smoke reduction strategy deployment. Once again, it was another winter full of many curtailments, quite a bit of education and outreach and grants that were offered to residents to upgrade their devices, as well as enforcement and other work that we do to really try to educate the public about the importance of reducing residential wood burning. So we will be reporting on that. I anticipate in April, both at the board meeting and the CAC, quite a bit of analysis and data that we share coming out of each winter to see how the strategy went, as well as any lessons learned, any opportunities for enhancement as we move forward with that continually evolving work that we do in the valley. So I just want to let you know that it's closed. Even while it's closed, we really encourage the residents of the valley to continue to reduce burning if they can in their residences, and really take advantage of the grants that we offer as well to upgrade their devices to natural gas and electric technologies, or the cleanest wood burning devices up in the foothill communities, where it isn't feasible to use some of the other technologies. So just wanted to make you aware of that and come back to the CAC with some better information, once we've got all of that data analyzed, and we'll be able to share some thoughts in terms of how this last winter went. And with that, Mr. Chair and CAC members, I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, is there any questions
Through the
from?
chair, it looks like Mayor Fast has her hand raised.
Okay.
Mary, can you hear us? I believe you are on mute.
Okay, yes, just a couple of items. The minutes, I think we need to vote on that. And just a comment about his electric trucks. What is the ability, how far can those trucks go without a charge? And are there charging stations enough to actually use trucks that are electric already?
Yeah, I can take both of those, Mr. Chair. We've taken a look at this, our legal, our district council, as far as legally on the minutes, and our position has been, and we're happy to revisit this if the CAC members wanted to take a second look at that. But our legal position has been, as long as we have a quorum for action and there's consensus on the minutes, that a vote isn't necessary. But again, it's just something that we can always, reevaluate. And I think the CAC has generally been, in fact, I think we talked about this probably a couple of years ago and got, support for that. But it's always one of those things we can take a second look at. On the second part there with the trucks, it's a very good question. It's one of those things that we want to we want to learn a lot, from this project in terms of any of the obstacles and barriers that may be faced and how we overcome them. The funding does include, quite a bit of charging infrastructure that goes along. So as I mentioned, it's $36 million. So that's for a combination of vehicles, infrastructure. These are projects that have been designed, by these companies to be successful in deploying these trucks. I think there's a 400-mile range. So the Fresno project will utilize Tesla trucks. The Albertsons project up in the North Valley will utilize Volvo trucks. So there's actually two different truck manufacturers. My understanding is that they're about a 400-mile range on each of these trucks. These are heavy duty, class 7, class 8 trucks. Although they, most of the application of the trucks, I believe, is going to be more of a regional nature. So they're not going to be long haul trucks going, too great of a distances. They're going to be coming back to their home base. So they'll be making deliveries and then returning back for charging. So there is sufficient infrastructure, there is sufficient range with these vehicles as designed, but it is very cutting edge. It is very new. A lot will be learned, I think, in this process. These trucks, for example, are not deployed in large numbers today. These are brand new technologies that are going to be fresh off the production lines, and these are some amongst the first projects that will be deploying these technologies. So I suspect that as we work with these partners, there's going to be quite a bit of lessons learned. But it is something that is quite a strong interest out there in the business community, and obviously the state is moving in this direction. So it's great to be able to see Valley entities be some of the earliest adopters of these. But I suspect there's going to be some interesting lessons learned about how to make these successful, and quite a few bumps along the road, I would imagine, that we'll be coming back and reporting on as this project develops.
Yeah, I know in the school bus arena, some of the school buses have been parked that were electric because they don't have the distance to go for the routes that are needed in that district. And that's a concern that I have, is if you get a new truck and you can't drive it, what good is it? That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Mr. Liba, I have a question.
I have a question.
Go ahead, please. Mr. Lieber?
Okay, thank you very much. I assume you can hear me. The obvious observation from an accountant is we have $36 million. We have 100 electric vehicles. Is that $360,000 per electric truck? Pretty expensive there. And of course, I understand there's infrastructure, but for example, the Global Warming Solutions Act says we are to develop what is the mitigation of GHGs that's metric ton, per dollar spent. And I would think the same thing would be true for SOx and NOx and VOC and PM 2.5. Is very, very, very expensive. And so I'm hoping that not only do we have the projections of what these emissions reductions are going to be, but we actually measure them down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify something.
Please.
Mr. Leva actually brought up a really good point that is at the crux of, I think, the ongoing discussion around technology deployment. And there's a lot of work going on. You'll probably hear from Carb later about the scoping plan and all the various discussions that are going on with respect to technology. I just want to clarify though, for this project, that the funding also goes towards workforce development and a number of other activities, beyond just the price of the trucks. But they're definitely more expensive. These trucks are up to near double what a conventional truck might cost. There's no doubt about that the battery technology and the costs are still up there. There is a demonstration element to these types of projects in that until they become more commercially available and they're able to bring that cost down, there's a recognition that in the earlier phases of deploying these technologies that there is going to be a higher cost. And that's why there is workforce development, education. There's a lot of tracking of data that's also a part of these contracts. So it's not just a straight deployment of what we hope to be a lower cost technology as you develop over time. There's quite a bit of investment going on by all the major manufacturers, by the way, in developing these technologies. So that is one of those things that we, as we think about these different deployments, these don't really stack up today as far as cost effectiveness compared to some of the more conventional technologies. But there is a demonstration element to this, and what you hope, as we've seen with, for example, with passenger electric vehicles, what you hope is that those costs go down over time as they're produced in bigger numbers. So I just wanted to kind of point to where this sort of fits into the grand scheme of things, that it is going to take some time before you see these technologies anywhere near the lower costs that you see with some of the more conventional technologies. But there are investments that you have to make up front to be able to get them to get to that point where you have to demonstrate these, see how they work. And our board has been very clear that they're going to support across the board, all in, zero emission trucks, deploy, demonstrate, get those costs down, while we're also supporting near-term reductions to make sure that we get the air quality benefits that we're looking for.
Mr. Leva, you're okay with that?
No, I appreciate the comments. Let's not forget to set the standards and do the measurements, please. And I'm a very proud father of someone who works at Tesla, and I have clients who are mechanics who have tried to work on electric trucks. So I just think we should cast a cold eye on this and tell me what the GHG reductions are and the VOC, the PM 2.5, and then measure them over time against what the actual costs are and what we think the lower efficient costs are. Because look, we want to encourage folks to devote funds to where it has the best effect in mitigating pollution and health effects. And we hope this will work, but we really need to coldly measure those emissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members?
Through the chair, I believe Mr. Cryer had a question.
Okay, Mr. Pryor?
Thank you. I'm in the farming business, and we have trucks, we like we call sub-haulers. We run about, right now we're running from Imperial Valley to Kern County. We're running about 30 trucks a day going back and forth. Then we have another 6 or 7 trucks going to the LA market. And the distance between point A to point B is round trip is like close to 700 miles. In our local haul, the trucks will probably run about 300 miles a day in our local, but long distance. Is there a truck will be capable of going about 700 plus miles on a battery charge?
Sorry, I don't think I caught the last question. What was the last? I wasn't sure I heard what your question was.
Well, the distance of these trucks, what would be the best distance for these trucks? Because if they do less than 500 miles a day or a charge, they would be kind of useless in our operation. Altogether, we run about 60 trucks. We would like to go electric, but only if it would meet our requirements.
Yeah, so maybe just an observation. We agree. I mean, there's definitely a lot of application out there that these vehicles are not yet suited for. And so what, and as I mentioned before, and maybe one thing we could do is come back to the CAC with an update on some really time sensitive work that's going on right now. I think there's actually a workshop going on at the same time as this meeting to look at updating the incentive program guidelines around all of the truck opportunities. So there's funding for electric trucks, but there's also funding for what are called the Plano 2 technology, the near zero technology that would be predominantly fueled, say, by renewable natural gas and some of the other fuel streams that are out there. There's actually work that's going on right now to look at, how do we enhance the incentive programs and make those available to fleets so that when fleets are looking at how to deal with the truck rule, the deadlines that are coming up by next year and then beyond, right? As you upgrade your sustainability plans and you look for that latest technology and look for ways to make this work, what's available out there. And it is an all-in approach from my perspective in terms of you got to take a look at all these different things. What's the cost? What's the infrastructure? What are the incentives that are available? And there is quite a bit of development that's going to be happening over the next couple of months with those incentives for fleets, everything from electric to, to other technologies as well. I think it'd be worth coming back and talking a bit about that just from a broader perspective, because, obviously this is exciting news, from my perspective at least. And I think probably shared broadly that we're able to bring $36 million of state funds that otherwise would not be coming into the Valley. By the way, without a single dollar of district funding going into these projects. These are business-driven projects. These are, these were developed by these local entities that want to try out these technologies. They put the coalition together with us. They applied for these funds. So these are very exciting to, but this is by no means the only technology or the only effort that's going on. There's quite a bit of other funding, quite a bit of other policy around looking at these issues with heavy-duty trucks. So we can come back. Hopefully, as the state considers some enhancements to the incentive program that makes it very difficult to fund these types of projects, we can come back with a report and hopefully be able to share that information on a little bit of a broader basis so you can get a feel for what may be available for your fleet, just other questions that may come up around that as well.
Okay, thank you, Samir. Any other CAC members?
Through the chair, I see no indication of additional member comment on this item.
Okay, how about the public on Zoom or phone?
Nor do I see an indication of public comment on this item.
Okay, great. Samir, the only comment I would have on this thing is we have been talking is I think with your staff being involved and knowing our concerns even from the gentleman from agriculture standpoint is the cost. And we've seen some of the costs. And I think now ARB is really looking at that as well. When I think that the main thing we also have to remember for agriculture, but for industries, is the actual tear weight, the actual weight in which a truck will carry. So we don't offset it like we've done with the 26,000 pound truck that went to 53,000 pound truck, is that we change some of the dynamics. We now are paying for a truck to haul the truck weight. We can't haul enough product because the truck weight will take away the product weight because of the battery and the infrastructure. So we're going to have to be making sure that in this study between Albertsons and Coke, whatever that is, that we definitely look at the weight of these trucks. And if they're the short trucks, the 26,000 pound, we now have gotten rid of that category. So we're going to have to be very conscious to make sure that if these companies are doing this, that they also have to look at, and there has to be discussion by ARB and us, that we need to look at the dynamics of all the things, not just of what Albertson does with only 80,000 pound trucks, because we don't want the 80,000 pound truck to suddenly not carry 50,000 pounds of weight, but now it's only going to be able to carry 38,000 pounds because all the other weight has been determined by equipment that has to make this truck work. And I think we have to be very conscientious to that and understand that. And I know that's been brought to you guys' attention. The best thing I think about this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is the training development part is to train vocational skills of mechanics, to train drivers Class A drivers, because we have a big shortage of that. Is that going to be part of this entire process so that in our vocational schools that we have in San Joaquin Valley, that we are also going to be talking to those people and making sure that we reach out to high schools and junior colleges, but people that are interested in wanting to become a mechanic of dealing with an all-zero vehicle. Is that actually going to be part of that money? Do you know, or is it just that that's a discussion?
No, Mr. Chair, they're absolutely, and you bring up a really good point. You know, during our board meeting, there was a great discussion around not only the schools that were already, committed to partnering on providing that education to their students. There's some technical schools and some technical programs that are already actually funded through their projects, but actually even bringing more schools into it. And I think you and several other folks had some suggestions of some of the schools that could be invited to participate in this, and we are following up on that to try to maximize the reach of this. And it's a chicken and egg kind of a situation at times with these things, right? Where you've got to have programs that are kind of being ramped up in parallel with more of the deployments. Otherwise, you got a program that doesn't have the vehicles to service, and kind of vice versa. And I recently went even through a personal experience with, I have a light duty passenger electric vehicle that there aren't enough mechanics out there actually, and it's growing, it's getting better, and but this can be a pretty rocky sort of an enterprise deploying new technologies like these. If you don't have enough educated and trained people to service vehicles like these, you have major issues in terms of providing the services the fleets need to keep these vehicles on the road and to deal with issues that come up. So that's absolutely an element of the funding, and it's something that we'll be happy, if anybody has any questions about that, happy to share some more details as to what that looks like. And if you have any ideas, please let me know. We had a great discussion about that during, but appreciate you bringing that back up, Manuel.
No, thank you very much. And maybe, Michelle, we could have this maybe for the next couple of months, maybe as a standing item of a report from the staff and from Samir's team, that in this way the CAC members will know what's going on. The one thing to kind of that the mayor brought up was, and maybe yourself or Todd know about this, is the buses that are being parked because they are not operating because they don't have enough ability to go a distance. And did those buses come through our program or ARB's program? Can we have more, if you know anything about it? But number two, if not, we should probably try to figure out if that's the case, then that ties into this distance travel. And if these buses are out in rural communities, that becomes very, very dangerous with kids on a bus just sitting on a county road. So do you have any info about that, or maybe the mayor may also share more information? Or
yeah, what I could do, I don't have any information at my fingertips on that. We're generally oversubscribed in those programs. Although there's certainly districts that have tried to plan around these technologies where they've been able to implement them. I've seen them come in. There's been challenges at times too, depending on the range and the particular needs of a school district. So I think I haven't heard of buses being stranded. I'll be honest with you. It's not to say that it's not happening, but usually, I mean, it's about as certain of a route as you could plan for up front. And what I mean by that is, like, you have every detail that you need to know generally up front to know exactly what range you need, where you need the infrastructure, what you get out of the infrastructure. So what I've generally seen our districts plan this extensively before they go in and purchase a vehicle, and they do it in cases where clearly they're able to do it, and that seems to have worked in all the cases that I'm aware of. But there certainly could be issues. It is becoming a broader deployment. It's happening everywhere across the country right now, especially in California. Many different school districts are using electric buses right now. We've actually funded a number of them. We operate the state's electric bus, both transit and school bus grant program through the Volkswagen mitigation funds. So we've been funding buses not only through that program, but also through other programs like the AB 617 program, where we've been some of the earliest funders of projects like those. And I'd be happy to come back with maybe a little bit of a report on how that effort is going. And, if the mayor has some feedback that, that I'd be happy to talk to her and get better information about what's going on and see if there's issues that can be addressed, but I do think that this technology is fairly mature in that sector. Electric transit buses, for example, are also becoming, there's literally hundreds of millions of dollars that are becoming available through the infrastructure funding as well for electric buses. So the ship is sailing, and the only question at this point is, how do we make sure that our local agencies are able to design projects that work well enough with this funding to be able to move in that direction? And sometimes there are issues that come up when it's a new technology. So we're happy to take a look at that.
Super. Thank you very, very much. And Michelle, we've gone to the public already have we? Okay, is there any public comment of Samir on what his report is from the public that's on the phone or Zoom?
And through the chair, I just see no indication of public comment.
Okay, great. Again, Samir, thank you very much. Okay, now let's go to item number 7, update on the attainment plan and rules. And Samir, if you can lead into this, because there's some young lady that appeared from the back there to the front.
Some of you have already heard from me a few times this week.
I would,
sure.
I would like to maybe reintroduce, for those of you who know Jesse Fierro, formerly our assistant counsel, who was recently promoted to a new director position, director of air quality planning here for the district. Given all the major work that goes on with our state implementation plans, the regulations that we adopt, all the Clean Air Act implementation with EPA and with CARB to make sure the Valley is always doing what we need to do and satisfy what are often very serious and requirements that could bring penalties and sanctions and other major consequences to the Valley if not adequately addressed. It's something that our board has continued to invest a lot of attention to, and so we're very, very excited to have recently promoted Jessie into that position. And so she is here to provide now for the first time at the CAC meeting in her new role. Although she's
It's not the first time at CAC. I did these like a decade ago.
in this new role. So I was
Yeah.
careful because those of you that have been working on these issues for a long time would remember that Jessie did previously work in planning for many years. Before she got her law degree and became our assistant counsel. So she brings a wealth of experience and knowledge and great just skill set into this role. So we're really excited to have her in this position, and you will hear from her now, and she will do a much better job than I ever do in presenting.
Oh, nonsense. Thank you, Samira, Mr. Chair. It is nice to be back to present these updates to you and to participate in the planning process for the district again overall. You have attached to your agenda the usual rule updates, so I'm just going to highlight a few things of particular significance and give you some updates to the updates because we've been busy over the past couple of weeks. I will start first by drawing your attention to page 2, where we talk about the 2015 8-hour ozone standard. There is a plan in the works, and we have, since we published this, scheduled a workshop. So I wanted to make sure you all knew that we have a workshop scheduled for March 7th at 4 p.m. March 7th, that's Monday, less than a week from today. It's a technical work group on the plan. It will be available via Zoom. And in fact, if you can't make it at that time, we will post the recording after the fact. So do know that if you can't participate then, you can watch the recording later. You can always email us comments at any time to let us know what you think. At this particular workshop, we're going to be focusing on CARB's state strategy and the technical work that's going into the plan. So you'll hear a bit about the building blocks of the emissions inventory and the photochemical modeling that is going into that plan. So that's the focus of Monday. So check in on that, watch after the fact, email us if you have questions. We will follow up with an additional workshop sometime in April. We haven't scheduled it yet, but at that April workshop, that's where we would cover the rest of the plan, including the district strategy, modeling results, and things like that. So there's concrete things coming as we prepare to take the plan before our governing board in June. So do keep an eye. This is going to be moving a lot over the next few months. So keep your eye on that if you're interested in the ozone plan. In addition, I wanted to draw your attention to some of the rules that are in the works. And in particular, on page 4, I have an update to the update for Rule 4401 and the other rules related to leak detection for oil, for the oil refining. We have scheduled a workshop for this one as well. This workshop will be on March 10th. Again, available via Zoom. We'll post the recording so anyone can watch it after the fact. We'll always accept your comments if you have any questions or comments about those rules. We did have public scoping meetings on this one in the past, but I think we're in the home stretch. The details are starting to come together, and so we'll have a workshop on Thursday. Did want to note that Rule 4550 or conservation management practices, we're starting to review the science and gather whatever information we can to get that one some more momentum in the coming months. So I don't have a concrete update for you today, but more just alerting you to the fact that there will be updates to this one in the near future. And then the SIP update for county equipment breakdown rules. This was a SIP cleanup issue. There were some old rules in our SIP from before the San Joaquin Valley Air District even existed. We needed to take formal action to remove some of those old county rules from the SIP. So the governing board approved that at its at February meeting. So we'll be forwarding that on to EPA per their request. Those are the only updates I have for today. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Comments from Samir? Any comments? Okay. Why don't we go to the CAC members? Any comments from the members?
Through the chair, I see no indication of member comments on this item.
Okay, great. Why don't we go to the public on phone or Zoom?
And I do see no indication of public comment on this item.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much and welcome to the job.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to item number 8, verbal report from ARB. It's going to be Laura. Are you on, Laura?
I am, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Laura
Thank
Carr.
you. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. This is Laura Carr with CARB. I'm an air pollution specialist in our Air Quality Planning and Science Division. And I have an update from actions that our board took at our February hearing. It was sort of a lengthy hearing, took 2 days. I just have 3 items that I wanted to highlight here for you today. The first is that the board approved amendments to the Transport Refrigeration Units Airborne Toxic Control Measure, which is known as the TRU ATCM. And this TRU ATCM, or these amendments, will achieve emissions reductions by requiring the transition of diesel-powered truck TRUs to zero emission, a diesel particulate matter emission standard for newly manufactured non-truck TRU engines, the use of lower global warming potential refrigerant, facility registration and reporting, expanded TRU reporting and labeling, and fees. So the amendments cover a lot of ground there. The TRU ATCM amendments will help meet the state's air quality and climate goals, and will also help meet the governor's executive order N7920, which set a goal for 100% zero emission off-road vehicles and equipment in the state by 2035. The second item was an informational update. This was an update on the 2022 state SIP strategy. And this draft 2022 state SIP strategy describes the proposed control measures and emissions reductions from state regulated sources to support local air districts in attaining the 70 parts per billion 8-hour ozone standard over the next 15 years. Controlling ozone precursor emissions, in particular NOx, that's the key strategy towards attaining the federal ozone standards. And since mobile sources account for about 2/3 of NOx emissions statewide, many non-attainment areas in California, including San Joaquin, will need significant reductions from state measures to help meet that 70 parts per billion 8-hour ozone standard. So with the 2022 state SIP strategy, CARB is exploring and proposing a variety of measures to reduce emissions from sources under CARB's authority. And this draft 2022 state SIP strategy identifies those control measures and the emissions reductions that are needed to support attainment of that standard. So this was just an informational update that the board heard, and the board will consider the final state SIP strategy later this summer. The last item here that I wanted to highlight was another informational update, this one on the development of the 2022 climate change scoping plan, which is required under Assembly Bill 32. And CARB staff provided the board with an overview of this update, including specific statutory requirements and the public process guiding the development of the update, some key policy topics, the draft energy and industry and natural working land scenarios that are being modeled, and then some next steps prior to the public release of the draft 2022 scoping plan update. And the board also heard an update on staff engagement with the AB 32 Environmental Justice Advisory Committee and the committee's role in supporting the development of this plan update. So the draft and the final 2022 scoping plan update reports are going to be presented for the board's consideration at future dates. So that's all I had today. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. Open it up to comments from the CAC members at this time for Laura with ARB on her report.
Through the chair, I see no indication of member comment on this item.
Okay, great. Let's go to the public by phone or by Zoom.
And I see no indication of public comment on this item.
Okay, great. Again, Laura, thank you very much for your time and appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, go to item number. Thank you again. Item number 9, recommendation of members to appoint to the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, EJAG. Morgan.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the CAC. Just a quick item here, hopefully. There's just for purposes of refresh, there's another group here at the district called the Environmental Justice Advocacy or Advisory Group, excuse me. And then as part of that membership of that body, there's also some CAC members that serve on that group. There's one from each of the interest groups, so one industry ag, one environmental, and one city representative, as well as an alternate for each of those positions. The board, the governing board technically appoints those positions, but in doing so, they often look for recommendations from the CAC. And so we currently have 2 vacancies on EJAG in the CAC positions. One is the primary industry ag representative. There's currently an alternate, which is Mr. Cunha, but there's no primary right now. And then there's also we're also in need of an alternate city representative. So if the CAC was so interested in potentially recommending some members for the board to consider, that's what we're looking for today.
And Mr. Chair,
Samir,
we just wanted one last comment on that. And it's really entirely up to the CAC on this item, but we, in recognizing that Mr. Cunha is already the alternate in that position, just wanted to make sure it was clear that one option could be, if Mr. Cunha was willing, I'm not sure if he would be, but would be for that alternate position to be recommended and decided upon as the primary, or that for Mr. Cunha to switch from alternate to primary. So I just want to make sure it was clear that that's another option, in addition to just simply, taking volunteers and filling that primary position with somebody else.
Okay, thank you, Samir. No, I would, just from that discussion right now before I open it up, no, that would be fine, but with myself. But let me open it up to the members first before I make a comment on that. But CAC members, any comment to the presentation by Morgan?
Through the chair, I see no indication of public comment. Member comment, excuse me.
Okay. So I'll stop right there and I'll come back to me, Michelle, before I go to the public. So that way, in case the public is listening, they can have a chance to comment. I'd be happy, that would be fine, of myself going over to the primary. I have no problem with that. We do schedule them now in my office for Thursday nights, so we try to do it. The only problem is the electronics part of it. So when I'm there by myself in my office, I have to call the fire department. I've got to call the police department. So when I get lost of what am I going into? So that's the only hang up, but I would be willing to, if the CAC is fine with that, I'd be happy to move over. And if we need a motion, I think we need to have that discussion. And then we can do that if that makes it correct for Morgan. But now I'm going to open it to the public. Is there any public comments at this time, either by phone or by Zoom?
And through the chair, I see no indication of public comment.
Okay, let me bring it back for.
Mr. Chair,
Samir.
maybe just a question back to Morgan in terms of, what would the remaining seats be then? Would that be, if the CAC were to move forward with approving that change, going from alternate to primary for Mr. Cunha in that industry ag seat, what are the remaining seats that we'd hope to still be able to fill?
Then we'd have an alternate for the industry ag and then the alternate for the city.
Okay, I'd be willing to work to help get a ag individual to take my spot if that would work. I'd be willing to help try to find that person so we can fill that position. And is there any comment from the members on the city alternate replacement for the from the CAC? Any comments from those folks in that position from the city? It's very quiet. I'm feeling alone here. I'm feeling kind of lost. So make some noise so I know that I see a bunch of fantastic faces, but do we have to, Morgan, if we have
You're not
some of
alone.
our folks on this, go ahead. Okay.
Just
is
saying
there a
you're not
comment
alone,
from the
Manuel.
seat?
Thanks for holding down the fort for us there.
Ms. Fast has her hand raised. Mary Fast.
Okay.
Okay, so from the city perspective, Mr. Chairman, what
Yes.
are you looking for? Are you looking for an elected official or are you looking for just somebody representing cities?
An elected official that would come from the CAC that's in the city position, either as an alternate for the CAC, or in this case, it would be an alternate for the EJAG, and it'd be a city person, elected official.
Maybe
So were
just
you volunteering?
No.
Oh.
Go back to the COG then for somebody to fill out an application, or how does that work? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Yeah,
It's
Morgan.
it's a member from this body. So one of the city representatives that's currently appointed to this body, either the primary or the alternate. In terms of commitment, the group meets every other month, usually on the fourth Thursday of the month in the evening time. The meetings start at 5:30, usually are over around 7. The current primary for the city group is Mayor O'Brien. And he's usually pretty diligent in attending. So I don't know that the commitment would be significant from the alternate, but from time to time, if Mr. O'Brien wasn't able to attend, then the person could fill in.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
That is Orshel. I
So-
wouldn't have a problem volunteering.
Oh, great, excellent. I knew somebody would come forward. I knew it.
That sounded like,
Fantastic.
Mr. Chair, that sounded like a motion. I'll second that motion.
Fantastic. All right, so we have a motion for the city appointed alternate from the CAC. Does that person wish to make a comment? Thank you. We don't need it because you're accepted, and that's fantastic. But comments, please, from that person.
Mr. Chair, also, would that person be willing to include in that motion what appears to be something you're willing to do, but the recommendation to move you from the alternate seat to the primary position there for industry ag?
Okay, would the maker of the motion be okay with including what Samir described of? But somebody would, I would move over to the major, and then we'd have an ag alternate open. So who from the ag alternate business would be willing to sign up for that part of it? So maybe we can try to do all of it. So we're going to hold on to that little discussion of that second and the maker of the motion. And then is there somebody from ag and business that would want to take the alternate? Like I said, I'm pretty religious on attending as long as my skills of computer skills don't go way outside of the realm. I'm used to an Underwood typewriter, so you can see the issues.
What time is the ag meetings?
Excuse me, it'd be at 5:30 when the meeting does start, just like Morgan said.
It's typically the fourth Thursday of the month, Fernando, 5:30 to 7.
And through the chair, Mr. McLaughlin has his hand raised. Please.
Either or.
Okay.
And by the way, one more clarification, every other month too, Fernando, sorry, I should mention that again, but not every month, every other month, yeah.
Through the chair, I'd be willing to volunteer as the alternate.
Okay.
Chris McLaughlin. Mr.
Chris
McLaughlin?
McLaughlin?
Yep.
Chris, thank you. I didn't see you. You apparently are somewhere on the screen, but okay. So we have a motion to accept Chris McLaughlin as the alternate for ag and industry. And we have and then I will move into the the ag primary. Then we also have the same person of the motion of having the city major replacing to the alternate being
Mr. Cryer has volunteered to be the city alternate. Correct.
Okay, so we have the maker of the motion is good with that. This is complicated. Is the maker of the motion okay with that? And
Mr.
the
Cryer,
second?
can you hear us? Mr. Cryer? He's there.
Yes.
There.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the maker of the second?
As the maker of the second for all three positions, I renew my motion.
Okay, great. Whew. Okay, Michelle, let's just, why don't we go ahead? Do we need to go to public at all on
I
this?
think we did ask for public comment,
Yeah.
but we'll check one more time.
Yeah, if you
I
would,
do
please.
see a few members of the public, but I do not see an indication of public comment. So
Okay,
I'll go with roll call.
great,
Mr.
let's
Cunha?
have the vote.
You got it, Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark, I know he joined, but I don't see him here. Ms. Brown? Laura Brown, can you hear me?
Sorry, I had you on mute on 2 different ways, so that's a yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hofdahl?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Williams? Excuse me, Mr. Rios?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Deming?
Yes.
Ms. Dyer?
Yes.
Ms. Dyer, can you hear me? Thank you very much. Mr. Liba?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Staff?
Yes.
Mr. Cryer?
Yes.
Mr. Ward?
Yes.
And Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everybody, so very, very much. Appreciate it very much. Okay, we'll go to item number 9. Excuse me, number 10, update on the implementation.
Excuse me, through the chair, Manuel, we can't hear you.
Oh, the microphone.
I apologize. Thank you. Thank you. So now we'll go to item number 10. Presentation on the open burning incentive program and the alternatives. Todd?
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Samir, you
just
want
really
to go
quick,
first?
introduction to the item, and I'll turn it over to Todd here.
Perfect.
Just want to let you know, Mr. Chair, CSC members, that this effort to work with ag to transition away from open burning has been of the highest priority, not only for the district, but the CSC has also been very interested in this issue. So we're very excited to come here and share an update with you on where the grant program in particular has been, but also how it fits into the broader strategy. And again, working in partnership with agriculture to make this transition a reality. It's been a huge effort by the staff and particularly by the agricultural community, who's really, been under a lot of pressure these last months to come up with ways to deal with alternatives to the traditional practice of open burning for these remaining categories where it's been particularly difficult to deal with this issue. So it is something that we continue to do quite a bit of outreach on. I want to turn it over to Todd to share with you some of the details of where we are with this program, the $180 million that we were able to successfully advocate for in partnership with the CAC, who was a big supporter of that effort in this last budget cycle, and let you know where we're going as far as next steps as well. And with that, Todd, if you could take over the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Todd DeYoung, the district's Director of Grants and Incentives. And I am happy to be here this morning to provide an update on the implementation of the Alternatives to Agricultural Open Burning Incentive Program. So just by way of a brief background, and this is not news to anyone on this committee, I believe, that the Valley has the toughest restrictions on agricultural burning in the entire state. Through the implementation of SB 705 and then the subsequent amendments to District Rule 4103, the Valley has implemented prohibitions that have significantly reduced open burning through the years. Throughout this process, the district's governing board has prioritized continued efforts to identify and demonstrate new alternatives to reduce open burning, including the establishment of the final phase-out strategy, which I'll talk about next. So back in June of 2021, the district's governing board adopted and CARB approved the final phase-out strategy for the remaining open ag burning. This includes the near complete phase-out of ag burning by January of 2025. This includes phase-out schedules that maximize the reduction of tonnage of material burned as early as possible, however, taking into account feasibility of alternatives for different crop types, and that's important as we go through this. Throughout this process, there has been a recognition that the smallest of agricultural operations bear a significant issue with dealing with some of these requirements. And so through this process, they've been given the most flexibility and the longest time to adjust to these phase outs. And then we've actually incorporated additional information and additional elements into the grant program that deal with these smaller ag operations, and I'll go through those in future slides. There's been a recognition both from the state, the agricultural industry, and the district that significant incentives are going to be required to assist the growers with this transition in the coming years due to the limited availability of these additional options and the high cost of these alternatives. We're currently in the process of implementing and enforcing the phase-out strategy, and this includes extensive outreach to Valley growers regarding the requirements of the phase-out, but also the available resources, what's available to these growers in these agricultural operations as they do this transition over the next couple of years. Open burning is expected to continue to rapidly decrease in 2022 and the coming years as the final phase-out continues to be implemented each year. So obviously recognizing the need to develop these new alternatives, in 2018, the district governing board developed a new Alternatives to Agricultural Open Burning Incentive Program. Started out as a pilot program. It provides financial incentives to chip this agricultural material and reincorporate that material into the soil or apply it on the land if reincorporation is not a feasible alternative. And then we've developed what we call off-site beneficial reuse, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Since 2018, the district has allocated over $25 million in local funding for this program. Recognizing the success of this program and again, the need for these significant additional incentives, in August of 2021, the district's governing board accepted over $178 million that Samir talked about in additional state funding This funding had several goals. Number one was to expand fleet capacity for these chippers and shredders that are out there, to ensure that there was enough capacity to meet the demand of the agricultural industry, and then to support the deployment of these new alternative practices. So given that new infusion of funding from the state, the district retooled and relaunched our program on September 1st. And again, this table here shows the different categories that are available for funding. $30 million was made available for new equipment purchases, so purchasing additional chipping and shredding equipment to ensure that when these agricultural operations are ready to chip and shred and reincorporate, that there's equipment necessary and it's available to them to do that. And then a significant amount of funding has been made available for the alternative practices, so the actual funding for the chipping and shredding and reincorporation. To date, we've executed contracts over $25.6 million for the new equipment purchases. Actually, that's even increased since I put this slide together. We're very, very close to having that entire $30 million under contract for new equipment purchases. Since September, we've seen almost $27 million in alternative practice funding gone out to Valley growers, leaving about $110 million available in the program right now. So with the changes to the program that were implemented in September, we also revised our incentive amounts, working closely with the agricultural industry, with stakeholders, with equipment contractors. We've identified what we feel are appropriate incentive amounts for the program. This includes varying amounts for chipping with soil incorporation, recognizing that there's an additional cost to incorporate that material. Then we have chipping without soil incorporation or land application. And then we have what we call off-site beneficial reuse. And we've left this part somewhat open because we really want to understand the types of beneficial reuse that are out there, and start to develop these. So we are providing a higher incentive amount for these off-site beneficial reuses, understanding that there are transportation costs to move this material off-site. And so you can see we have one amount for orchards, we have cane prune vineyards that get a higher amount, and then cordon prune vineyards. The issue with cordon prune vineyards is this is wire entrained material. And so there's a significant amount of labor and additional cost to deal with the wire that is entrained within these cordon prune vineyards. And as I said earlier, throughout this entire process, small farmers and small agricultural operations often bear a proportionally higher cost to do some of these alternative practices. So in recognition of that, we're providing an additional $100 per acre on top of each one of these incentive amounts for those small agricultural operations. So as you can see by these charts, when we relaunched the program in September of 2021, we saw an incredible response. We've been averaging about $5.3 million in executed contracts per month since we reopened the program. You can see on the left, that yellow line is the 2021 applications received, and then on the right, the gray bar is the contracts that have been executed. So it's almost a threefold increase in monthly demand for the program from what we had seen in previous years. So this slide shows the participation by crop type. It's just a breakdown of where the funding has gone to which crop types. This first slide shows since 2018. So this is since the program inception back in 2018 as a pilot program. Obviously, almond orchard material makes up a significant portion of the funding and the tons of material that have been processed through the program. And then grapes coming in second, vineyards coming in second. And then if you look at this next slide, this is since we reopened the program with those enhancements for vineyard material. So you see about the same percentage for almonds, but you do see a significant increase in funding and acreage and materials, tons of material for vineyards. So those enhanced incentive amounts for vineyards are working. And again, getting back to smaller agricultural operations, since December of 2020, the district's governing board directed that 30% of the available funding be set aside for these smaller agro operations of less than 500 total acres in size. If you see, we've actually done better than that. We've actually provided about 35% of the total funding to those ag operations that are less than 500 acres in size. Actually, if you look at just the projects, we've actually done more projects for those smaller agricultural operations than we've done for the larger ag operations. In August of 2021, the district's governing board went the additional step to provide that additional $100 per acre in each one of those funding categories for those smallest of the small agricultural operations. So these are ag operations less than 100 acres in size. And if you look at the table at the bottom there, it shows that about 24% of the Valley total since August of 2021 has gone to these smallest of the small growers, that 100 acres or less. And then 11% of the total grant funding has gone to them. So as I talked about earlier, a big part of the additional funding that came from the state in August was to go to ensure that there was enough chipping equipment, that the fleets had enough capacity to accommodate the needs of the agricultural community as they're going through this transition. Since the launch of the program, we've seen a significant interest. We're well oversubscribed in the $30 million. We've funded 46 pieces of equipment to date. Every day and every week, we're seeing more pieces of equipment delivered and being implemented, and they're being used in the fields to provide that opportunity for those alternatives to the agricultural industry. This is just a breakdown of where the funding has gone for the new equipment purchases. And what types of equipment have been purchased. Now, I should say that just because a piece of equipment was purchased and it resides in Fresno, doesn't mean it only operates in Fresno. Almost every one of these pieces of equipment will travel. These contractors will travel valley-wide to accommodate the needs of the agricultural industry. But this just kind of gives you an understanding of the distribution of those pieces of equipment throughout the district. So one additional program enhancement that we took to the board last month was the inclusion of a combustion alternative. The State Budget Act of 2021 that authorized the funding to come to the district had very specific language that the funding could not be used for combustion alternatives unless CARB made some necessary findings. CARB made those findings in October 2021, and those findings were that non-combustion alternatives are not necessarily available in the needed numbers over the phase-out period, and those non-stationary combustion alternatives, specifically air curtain burners, would help meet the need moving forward. The new state funds can be used for the air curtain burners as an additional alternative under certain conditions, those conditions being for wire-infused crops. They're only a secondary priority when all non-combustion alternatives have been deemed to be not viable for a particular project. So we have to go through a process to make sure that all non-combustion alternatives have been looked at and they've been deemed non-viable before we could fund the use of an air curtain burner. So based on that CARB action, the district approved the enhancement to the program to include those air curtain burners as additional available alternatives subject to the following criteria. Again, we will continue to prioritize those non-combustion alternatives. We'll only authorize funding for air curtain burners when non-combustion alternatives have completely been eliminated as a viable option. They may only be used to address material with embedded wire that cordon prune vineyard material I talked about earlier. They must comply with all of the other current program requirements, including all the application, claim for payment, inspection, and all the other program requirements. And then the equipment used, the actual air curtain burners, must comply with all applicable local, state, and federal requirements, including district registration. As for an incentive amount, again, based on an analysis of cost and working closely with contractors and with the agricultural industry, we've landed on $1,000 an acre, which is the non-incorporation amount. If you look at the table from earlier, it's the same amount you would get for non-incorporation for cordon pruned or wire embedded material. So it's the same incentive amount that you would get for non-incorporation. So the next steps, essentially, we're continuing to monitor the program participation levels to ensure that we remain responsive to the Valley Ag needs. Specifically, we're concerned about the monthly rate of expenditure. Given the rate of expenditure, we're forecasting that funding will actually be exhausted within the next 12 to 18 months. And that's well before the January 2025 final phase out schedule. So significant additional funding is needed to support the final phase out. We'll continue to advocate for additional state funding support to support the transition away from open burning. And we've committed to returning to the district governing board in 1 year, so next February, to report on the program effectiveness and then propose any recommended changes that might be necessary. And then with that, we'll continue to focus on significant effort on ensuring that we have equitable access, that those small farmers, those small agricultural operations will continue to have equal access to the program funds. We're going to continue to implement new phase-out requirements each year, including seeking additional opportunities to provide those targeted outreach to smaller growers. We've already been engaged with Valley Ag organizations and community-based organizations with strong ties to smaller Valley growers, so that will continue. We want to make sure that we're doing as much outreach as we possibly can to ensure that a lot of these smaller ag operations that aren't necessarily maybe part of some of these larger ag organizations, that they have that equitable access to these funds and that they understand the requirements of the phase-out schedule. We'll continue to look for opportunities to support Valley growers and leveraging some complementary state and federal programs, including the EQIP funding, as well as the Healthy Soils program. And then we're working closely with CARB and Valley stakeholders to host the San Joaquin Valley Summit. I believe it's this summer. There is a date, I don't have it with me, that we've decided on that we'll be holding this summit. And it will provide a forum for sharing stakeholder perspectives, and it will also showcase these newly emerging technologies. And finally, this slide just shows some of the outreach that we're doing for this program. The multilingual outreach, we have this information, these are flyers. This information is available in Hmong, in Spanish, and Punjabi, obviously, as well as English, but it just highlights some of the multilingual outreach that the district is conducting. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions about the program.
Great. Thank you very much, Todd. Well done, well done. At this time, I'll open it to CAC members. Comments, please.
Through the chair, Mary Elizabeth has a question.
Go ahead, Marius.
Hi, I had a few questions. So on the beneficial reuse, was that your burning?
No, what we call the offsite beneficial reuse. In some cases, the material can't be incorporated, or some of the material can't be incorporated. And so what we've done is we've allowed for innovative approaches to deal with some of this material offsite. And so far, that's included using this material for dust suppression along roadways. We've had some of this material shipped to another state where it became a composite decking material. And so anything that's basically not incorporating it on site or land applying it on site, we're open to what we're calling those off-site beneficial reuses, non-combustion, sorry, yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's a very clear point that it has to be non-combustion in those cases.
Okay, and then another question was, how are your inspections keeping up with the monthly demand? So you must have some verification.
We do. We actually send district personnel out before and after, and we document each one of those inspections with photographs.
Okay, and then that would be, so it must be something else if they're taking it off-site or.
That's correct. It's a combination of that physical documentation from the inspector, as well as other documentation to prove that it was dealt with off-site.
It's been used very little, right? That offsite.
Yeah. To date, it's still a fairly new and sort of emerging concept, the off-site beneficial reuse, and really only I think about 3 or 4% of the material has been used in off-site reuse. The vast majority of the material is reincorporated. It's something over 96%, I believe, is reincorporated.
Okay, and then how much of the total operations, eligible farming operations for this program are classified as small? So I'm just wondering, about 25% of them are participating, or of the amount. And I'm wondering, valley-wide, how many operations are classified as small? So, I'm just wondering if there might be a need, for more aggressive outreach to the small, if they're not participating proportionately to how many there are in the valley.
I absolutely think there's a need, and I think we're going to be very aggressive, continue to be very aggressive at outreaching towards those smaller agricultural operations. I don't have a specific number in terms of a percentage of how many farms there are of a particular size in the valley, but I do know that we are heavily focused on outreach to the smaller, both the 500 and under, and particularly the 100 acre and undersized growers. So I certainly think that there is, there's room for continued engagement there.
And also just one last quick point on that, because I thought Mary Elizabeth, that was a great question, something we'll definitely be following up and looking into, but also just as far as how the grant program fits into the phase out schedule as well, just important to note that there are deadlines that basically are kicking in. So at the end of last year, there was a deadline for certain size, fairly large growers, vineyard operations that gets ratcheted down over time. And so the earliest requirements are for the biggest growers, and it's ramping up, really quickly. So and the smallest growers are given a bit more time now through that 2024 period. So there's other factors in the way that the applications come in as they relate to the actual phase out as well, where the larger growers are either already phased out or will very soon be phased out. There's an upcoming deadline at the end of this year, for example, that ratchets down once again on the vineyard operation side, as well as some of the other categories. So, and I also suspect that the size distribution is going to vary significantly between different crop types as well. So it is kind of complex as well, just on that side. But I think it's a great question, and something, and I agree with Todd. Huge focus and interest on our part on making sure the smallest growers are fully aware of the requirements, as well as the resources that are available. So we're always following up on leads whenever we have ideas on how to better do that outreach and get, meet with folks or whatever it might be. Always happy to take some suggestions on how to better do that.
Just a follow-up then on that. So when these large growers get phased out, they're no longer eligible for these incentives?
No, that's not part of the program. Yeah, the larger growers are eligible for the incentives, and will continue to be. And so, but that is part of what we, when we look at this a year from now, by next February, we're going to be looking very closely at all of those factors. Small grower participation, the phase out schedule, and we'll continue making recommendations to focus the program, where it needs to be focused on. But the $180 million, was basically provided directly to support that transition away from open burning. So that funding is available to growers of all sizes, and again, with that focus on how to make it available to the smallest operations.
Okay, I'm just concerned, because we have a capacity issue with our smaller growers, that, the larger growers might have, more resources available to access some of these funds, that there's not a firm set aside for, these smaller growers, so that the information doesn't, the money doesn't disappear and there not be any additional funds available. I apologize for that.
No problem. And Mary Elizabeth, I think we can keep, I absolutely get your point. And there is a hard set aside. A minimum of 30% of total program funds are directed by our board to be set aside, for the smaller growers. So there is that minimum, and we've seen greater participation than that. But it is something that we're going to be looking at over time to make sure that that number, as well as all the outreach that we do, that is properly, or is most effectively being done. But I just wanted to clarify that there is a minimum criteria that's been put into place for the program.
Okay, any other comments from CAC members of Todd or even Samir?
Through the chair, looks like Mr. Rios has a question.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yes, are you open to composting for off-site reuse?
I believe that is eligible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, it's eligible for on-site. So yeah, I believe it would be eligible for off-site beneficial reuse as well.
And that's something we can take a closer look at, Fernando. There were some requirements in the program associated with, I think what they called stationary source funding, something along those lines. So there may be some issues with that, but we'll, if there is a specific need or inquiry, related to that, we'll definitely follow up. But at this point, I haven't seen that personally, but let me know, Fernando. I'm happy to follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from CAC members?
Through the chair, I see no indication of member comments on this item.
Okay, how about the public on phone or Zoom?
I see no indication of public comments on this
Okay,
item.
great. Todd, yeah, I think the whole purpose of these funds were to help a combination of grower types. But the greatest concern was for the use of grapes because of the complex problem when you have steel wire in a vineyard, of how we tackle that. And that's been a challenge from the word go. And I think that's where these funds for the equipment manufacturers has really paid off, because they are spending a lot of time on modifying and figuring out what is the best to deal with this wire situation. It just doesn't happen in 3 years. It ain't going to happen just like that. It just can't happen. And yes, the small farmers, everybody that is a CAC member knows, the small farmers are not able to survive in this state. And so we have seen a huge reduction of small farms because of the regulatory impact of this valley and because of water. So agriculture has changed from 2000 and even 2010 in this state. Small farmers have been reduced dramatically. And we've seen it. I've seen it in my organization, especially in the vineyard world. The raisin world has dramatically reduced itself just because of the regulatory requirements, the water requirements with Sigma, and even the cities will be facing that situation as well. But the funding needs to be there for all farmers because of the cost. unless you own a farm and you actually see what you have to do out there every day, and the type of situations you're in is a different world as compared to any other business. All businesses have their challenges, but ag is open to the environment and to everything else. So I think the funding needs to continue, and we are working with various folks to continue this funding at least out to 27, the year 2027, and even maybe a little further. But I will say this, Todd, I think the district has done one tremendous job in the outreach to small farmers than I've ever seen. From the ag groups, from the farm bureaus, to all the other ag groups that are out there in this valley have gotten the information out and have done a good job at that. To see that many small farmers come into the number, under 100 acres even, that's incredible. So those farmers are being told and help guided. I will say that increasing of your staff has been tremendous to help that situation. The timeline, because of ripping, land leveling, irrigating, all of those things have to play out. Ordering of the plants, when they're in cold storage, you got to be ready to go. So you guys have been very cooperative in this entire program, Samir. I will say that I think it's been a great partnership with agriculture and this district communicating. But I will say that you guys have done a good job on the small farmers. What I have seen, and my growers that literally have called in have been very positive, okay? So I give a lot of credit to your human instinct of working with our growers and the age groups they're in, and especially with the vineyards. That is the most toughest because of that wire. So I don't know how much more to say, but thank you. And you guys have done a great job, and we look forward to continuing and making it happen for these small farmers. Thank you. Michelle, we've gone to the public already, correct? All right, great. Let's go to item number 11. Morgan, you're somewhere in the system here. You're going to give a report on the ERCs, the emission reduction credit, a very non-complicated rule. So young man, it's yours. So please go ahead and it's yours. Samir, do you wish to make any comment? Okay, great. All right, go ahead, Morgan, it's yours.
All right, thank you, Manuel. And it's a long presentation, but in the interest of time, I'll kind of go through it fairly quickly and then time for any questions, considering we brought this back and it's something that the CAC has been involved with for quite some time. So just maybe to the next slide, please. Just next slide. Yeah, it's just a quick overview. In addition to all the prohibitory rules that we have, the district also operates a permitting program. And kind of the core of that permitting program is our Rule 2201, which is the new and modified stationary source review rule. And this rule is designed to meet both federal and state so-called NSR requirements. And it's subject to the most rigorous requirements due to our attainment status. And so especially for the ozone side, because of our attainment status, we're required to have very stringent requirements in this rule. Some of the key elements in the rule include the requirement to have so-called best available control technology, which helps, it mandates emission controls to minimize emissions. There's also emissions offset requirements that require emissions above certain specified thresholds to be mitigated with either concurrent reductions or banked emission reduction credits. We also have historically used what's called a federal offset equivalency system, and I'll get to that a little bit later, but basically to ensure that our local NSR program was as stringent as federal requirements. And then also our program has public notification requirements, so that prior to the issuance of an authority to construct, we would send that project out to garner comments on projects that result in emissions above specified levels and under certain circumstances. Next slide, please. The equivalency program that I was talking about, under federal law, there's very stringent offsetting requirements for certain types of projects. under state law, there's differing stringent requirements, but at times they're not the same. And then even under local law or local rules, we've had some differing offsetting requirements as well. And so going back 20 so years ago, based on the attainment status we were in at the time, local and state rules resulted in having an offsetting program that was more stringent than federal requirements. And so at that time, we had proposed and got approved what's called an offset equivalency program. And that was approved by EPA and ARB back in 2001. As part of that approval, we're required to do an annual demonstration that our program continues to be at least as stringent as federal requirements. And that's required to be submitted to EPA CARB, and we present it to the governing board each year at a public hearing as well. And that report must demonstrate that both in terms of the quantity of credits or offsets that are required are sufficient to meet federal offsetting obligations, and the so-called value of those credits. And there's a big difference in how credits are valued in California versus the federal system. In California, the value of a credit is determined at the time that emission reduction project happens. And so when someone comes in and does an emission reduction project that's voluntary, not required by any rule or regulation, they're able to what we call bank those credits to be used at future time to satisfy these requirements. And in California, those are valued at the time of that banking action. In the state, under a federal law, you have to revalue those credits at the time they're going to be used. So if there has been, since the time of that initial banking, if there's been new rules or regulations or commitments that have come and would otherwise have required those reductions, those credits then lose their value or lose a portion of their value. And then also the rule contains specific remedies that have to be automatically enacted in the case that equivalency is not demonstrated. So next slide, please. So just a little bit more of a background just to get everyone back up to speed. The California Air Resources Board conducted or ordered their staff to conduct an audit or review of the district's ERC program back in 2019. That was in response to a request from environmental advocacy organizations. And the review focused on our program, which included both the equivalency demonstration as well as other aspects of our offsetting program as it relates to federal, state, and local regs. The district worked with CARB during that review, provided them all necessary information that they asked for, and CARB finalized their report back in June of 2020, and their board held a public hearing on that report and approved their staff's recommendations, along with certain commitments that the district had made to address some of the findings that ARB had in their review. Next slide, please. Overall, we appreciated CARB's general recognition of the stringency of the district's air quality programs and our success over the years in reducing emissions. Their review did point, though, to the need to revisit and potentially enhance certain aspects of our ERC program, and in particular, our offset equivalency program moving forward. And because of that, we had made some commitments to the CARB board at the time. Some of the measures were transparency related. Others were specific actions to address certain assumptions and categories that were used in the equivalency determination. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So I'll give you I'll go through now on the next couple of slides, those commitments that we made and kind of our progress to date in making those. So one of the important commitments we made was to each year hold a public workshop prior to taking that report to the governing board to explain what the outcome of those findings would be. And since that time, over the last 2 years, we have held those public workshops in October one year, in November the previous year. And those were prior to the report being submitted to EPA. So it was a workshop on the draft report and allowed commenting before we finalized the report. Next slide, please. We also made a commitment to enhance the report itself, the annual demonstration report, to make the report more understandable, easier to digest, as well as to more fully characterize adjustments that have to be made in the so-called year-to-year carryover balances to ensure that the public can better understand all the adjustments in a tracking year and what's being done. Since the time of the review, we've significantly enhanced the reports. Each year, we're continuing to take and incorporate stakeholder suggestions for making the report easier to understand, and also providing enhanced detailed explanations of the methodology that we use, that's used behind the equivalency process. And we continue, or we will continue to do so moving forward, to continually make incremental improvements to that report as we get suggestions from stakeholders. Next slide, please. We also committed to creating and convening a so-called public advisory working group consisting of affected stakeholders, which included community-based organizations, regulated valley businesses, members of this body, the Citizens Advisory Committee, EPA, and CARB, really focused on assisting to develop solutions related to the district's equivalency system and how to generate credible emission reductions for use through the permitting process. That group was created by the governing board back in August of 2020 with the first kickoff meeting in September. It provides a forum for discussion and suggestions that are used then to assist the district as we look for solutions and enhancements related to our ERC program and offset equivalency system. It's also an avenue to hear perspectives and to receive input on the systems from stakeholders. And to date, we've held 11 meetings. And they've been critical in meeting some of these commitments that I'm talking about today, as well as I think will continue to be critical moving forward as we look to do some enhancements to our rule. Next slide, please. There are some very specific committed actions that we took to address some emission reduction categories that were historically used in the equivalency system. Those were what are called agricultural engine combustion conversion projects, and were the so-called Ag ICE program. Those are basically projects where there was funding available to move from diesel agricultural pump engines to electric pump engines. And then there's also another category, which are called the so-called Orphan shutdown projects. And those are basically when a facility would shut down their operations. They have an individual facility that has the ability to bank those credits for themselves. But when they didn't go through the banking action themselves, then the district would take those credits, the so-called unbanked credits, into our program to help with equivalency. And so CARB had some questions and some concerns regarding the use of some of those credits and the appropriateness of some of the assumptions and calculations that went into those uses. And so back in September of 2020, the district governing board proactively withdrew those emission reductions from those two categories from the offset equivalency system due to some of those concerns and questions that remained there. And that board action enacted one of the remedies within our rule as they were no longer able to demonstrate equivalency with the surplus value test for NOx and VOC after that action. So that basically enacted one part of federal offsetting for NOx and VOC after that action in September of 2020. Next slide, please. The district also committed to updating some of our policies that pertain to the quantification of emission reductions from orphan shutdowns, and also to ensure procedures and staff training is sufficient to maintain consistency within the NSR program as it deals with credibility of emission reductions and calculation of ERCs. Since the time that board took the action, the district has not included any new orphan shutdown reductions in the equivalency system. And as I said, they had removed all existing reductions. We're currently evaluating the development of new mechanisms and methodologies for the use of these and other types of credible emission reductions, such as orphan shutdowns, as well as looking at things like reductions from portable equipment, as well as mobile source reductions. And those will likely be captured in future rulemaking to go through that process to outline the proper banking and credibility mechanisms. And then we've also worked to enhance some of the other issues in terms of our policies and procedures, and we've assigned and trained a specific group of staff that are now exclusively responsible for overseeing our ERC program and our offset equivalency program. Next slide, please. Now, the last commitment that we had was to develop a new equivalency tracking database and system. which included, all the necessary and essential documentation of how that system will work. We're still in process there. We will begin the development of that new database and associated tracking infrastructure once an approvable path forward is developed and carbon EPA and the district's NSR and ERC banking rules are amended accordingly. So once that happens, then we'll start the work on a new tracking database. In the meantime, we're still using the existing systems that we have in place. Next slide, please. So to give a little bit of a highlight of the last couple of years of the equivalency demonstration, there were 2 years ago, the first year after the review, there were significant adjustments that needed to be incorporated into that demonstration. One was the board's action regarding the removal of the IGIS and Orphan shutdowns. And there was a host of other ones that are on the list here that had to address, some of the findings that were brought forth in the review. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, one quick follow-up on that. One outcome of those issues and those adjustments that we had to make was that at the end of that, we were no longer able to demonstrate, or the system was no longer able to demonstrate equivalency for the second part of the federal offsetting, the quantity test for federal offsetting. And so since that time, for any projects that trigger federal offsetting for VOCs, there's no longer an equivalency process for that. They now have to comply with full federal offsetting requirements. Now, this last year's equivalency demonstration that was just completed at the end of 2021, we went through that process again. As I said before, VOC was no longer part of that demonstration. So we looked at NOx, PM, SOx, and CO as part of that, and looked at the specific projects that triggered, as well as any adjustments that need to be made. Next slide, please. And as a result of that, we initially had submitted our report because at the time, there's very strict timelines on how quickly we have to get these reports submitted. So we submitted that report back in November, as we were required to do. However, as we've continued to look at that report and evaluate that report, the report identified that there was an annual NOx shortfall in the offset quantity test. Now, that was an annual shortfall, and we did use what's called a so-called carryover. That the program is designed, or was designed historically, to allow deviations on an annual basis, as long as in total you have a sufficient quantity to cover those shortfalls. However, based on where we're at today, this shortfall highlighted the possibility that the current remedies that are within our rule will not be sufficient to ensure that the program will remain equivalent with federal offsetting obligations. And it has a lot of issues. It's really imperative that the district system does operate a program that ensures federal offsetting requirements can be met on an ongoing basis, because without doing that, individual permitting projects there's questions regarding the validity of those permitting projects, and we need to make sure that there's that those projects can withstand any potential challenges, because they can meet all the requirements that are there. So in looking at this issue and to address this issue, the board took action just last month to require moving forward that all projects triggering federal offsets for NOx be required to provide ERCs for the full federal quantity and value. So that basically brought the NOx offset requirements now to be consistent with the VOC requirements as they've been over the last year. This recommended action was discussed at the last PAW before it went to the board, as well as through some other stakeholder engagement that we did. But it does highlight the ongoing challenges that we have, especially on the ozone precursor side, with ensuring that federal offsetting obligations can be met. Next slide, please. So in terms of moving forward and next steps, right now we're currently pursuing what we call a multi-path approach. In accordance with our existing rule and the remedies that are contained within that rule, we must amend our rule, our NSR rule, associated with federal offsetting, to require federal offsetting for NOx and VOC. Now, we're doing that we have to do that anyways for the projects that come forward, but we now have to officially change our rule to make it more clear what the federal offsetting requirements are. And although we are doing that for NOx and VOC consistent with the rule, we will be maintaining the equivalency system for particulate matter, for SOx, and for CO. And there's a big reason why we can do this. When this rule was additionally approved and developed back in the early 2000s, at the time, our rule, as I said earlier, was more stringent than federal requirements. In 2010, we were required to reclassify for ozone to extreme non-attainment. And when we did so, that change basically brought all of brought all the federal requirements down to be in line with our local requirements. So we lost the stringency, the excess stringency that our rule had, which is now what's resulting in the challenges that we face on those two pollutants with being able to ensure federal offsetting obligations are met. Now, we don't have that same issue with PM, with SOx, and with CO. Our rules are still more stringent than federal requirements when it comes to those pollutants, and their offsetting requirements and SR requirements for those pollutants. And so we feel that we'll be able to continue to operate a system, and I think at this point EPA and CARB concur that we'll be able to operate a system, equivalency system with those pollutants, and so we intend to do so. Now, the proposed amendments that we'll be starting to work on will have to include, again, adopting the federal offsetting program for NOx and VOC, which will result in some amendments to offsetting methodologies, exemptions, and certain requirements. And then we're also, one of the issues that this did highlight was the potential issue that the existing remedies within the rule aren't sufficient in the chance of a failure to be able to ensure federal offsetting obligations are met. And so we think we're going to have to amend, while we'll maintain an equivalency program for those other pollutants, we'll likely have to amend the remedy in the case that at some point in the future they weren't able to continue to demonstrate equivalency, how that circumstance would have to be treated. We're planning on holding a public scoping meeting in late first quarter or early second quarter, so probably now looking into April before that scoping meeting happens. And then the public advisory work group will continue to help inform the rule development process. Next slide, please. And then one of the things that we're closely looking at, and we've been sharing with our board as well, is in terms of ERC supply and demand. We need to continue to identify options to generate sufficient quantity of surplus credits to support federal offsetting requirements. Our preliminary analysis projects possible future shortfalls of VOC and NOx ERCs. And so without ERCs and or the ability for project proponents to bring forth concurrent emission reductions, that produces challenges for people being able to have do modifications or install new facilities within the valley. And so this is definitely something that we're very closely looking at and looking for development of new alternatives. Historically, most of the ERCs have been generated through stationary source emission reduction projects. However, due to the stringency of our rules, because of our attainment challenges, there's very limited opportunities for generation of new ERCs through those traditional pathways. However, there are new technologies that are emerging, some of which we talked about earlier, and so as some of those come forward, there may be some opportunities there, but it's definitely challenging and very expensive to do so. And so our focus really right now is on looking for so-called non-traditional sources and methods, some of which I've talked about previously, such as mobile sources, portable equipment, and we think that there's some avenues there that we'll be able to bring forward, although there definitely are questions and challenges with those. I mean, EPA and CARB both have questions about the ability to use some of those methodologies, and I think there's a lot of work that remains, and that's something we're spending a lot of time on in the PAW meetings discussing. And as part of the rule development process, we'll need to formalize these new banking methodologies, similar to how we have a formalized ERC banking methodology, so people can actually generate and then use those credits to meet offsetting obligations. So with that, that's kind of the update that we have today. I know we covered a lot of ground, but we're open to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Great. Thank you very much, Morgan. Samir, any comments? Okay, great. Why don't we go to the board? CAC members, any comments or questions of Morgan's presentation on the ERCs?
It looks like Mary Elizabeth has a question through the chair.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Just a quick one. Are the existing tracking systems of these offsets available to the public?
Yeah, so all of the credits that people have, that people own, the ERC credits are published on our website. There's a banking registry on our website. And then the individual projects that bank, when there's an actual banking action, those are publicly noticed and available. They're also public record. And then any project that actually uses those credits, generally, I mean, those credits are also publicly available, or they're publicly noticed projects that are available as well on our website.
And then I just had one other quick one. So you mentioned mobile sources in regard to the ERC banking. Is that what's called the indirect rule? Or is that something different?
That's something different.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Savage?
Thank you. Morgan, thanks for the update. I'm going to lower my hand before I forget to do that. Actually, that was a very efficient way to get through a very complicated topic in a short period. So I'll give you your credit where credit is due on that one. That was not easy to get through. I'm working hard to make a positive comment here, because I think we continue to undersell in every presentation we do the impact of what just happened. Because there's not a possibility of shortage in NOx and VOC. It is a fact. And as a result of that fact, your comments about no one being able to grow is not even so much the issue anymore for existing facilities. It's even replace equipment, where this will make it very, very difficult even to replace equipment with some of the upgraded equipment that's out there based on some of the other permitting rules. So I just want to continue to reinforce the severity of what just happened and where we currently are and what future effects it has. Bless you, Manuel. That was recorded, by the way. And I'm a bit of a broken record on that point, and I realize that, but I feel a need to make that point every time. I would like to continue to ask that obviously this will stay on the CAC agenda moving forward. It would be nice to see the next time you come, Morgan, if possible, a summary of the balance that is left in the bank for NOx and VOC specifically. And then through the PAW, I know there's been a lot of conversations that have gone on about, possibilities and future opportunities, but I don't think much is coming out of that at this point that is going to produce any amount of credits that are going to the bank. And never say never, because we'd like to think there's always a possibility there, right? But I think at this point it is probably fair to say there is no obvious pathway through this to develop more credits. Is that accurate?
I mean, I think some of the mobile source arenas, I mean, they're going to be difficult to get through, but I think there's some value there in terms of being able to some specific projects. Now, a lot of it's going to be project specific, like you said. Now we also have been seeing, I think, project design, I think, plays a factor into this as well. And I think that we've been seeing some people get creative in how they design projects that has significantly reduced, if not eliminated, their need for offsets. And while that's not always possible, there is some opportunities there, and working through how the federal offsetting requirements work and what is considered a federal modification or major modification. So, but I agree with you. There's not, we're past low hanging fruit on this one. I mean, most of the low hanging fruit was gobbled up many, many years ago. And I think the banking of future credits is going to be challenging. And we're doing our best to work with everybody to try to find as many pathways as possible and opportunities as possible. So as people have ideas about certain types of projects, there's at least an approvable pathway for them to look at how they can, create credits and be able to monetize those or use those for themselves.
Yeah, and appreciate that, and I agree, district staff's been helpful, and I don't know if there's an opportunity to put on some additional permitting guidance for some of the smaller operations that may not have the benefits of professional staff, at their facilities that could benefit from some of those conversations. But I would again, the low-hanging fruit comment is just another, we need to be crystal clear. There's no low-hanging fruit, there's no mid-tree fruit, there's barely one orange at the very top of the tree at this point. And I'll go back to a comment Manuel made earlier during the ag burning discussion about the difficulty of small farmers surviving in California. The same will be said and is being said for any level of manufacturing that requires permitting in California. We are rapidly moving facilities towards leaving the state at a rapid pace. And I think that is a message that needs to be said loudly and clearly, and not watered down in any way, shape, or form, because that is where we are headed. And it's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be next year. But it's going to be in most of our careers, and certainly in most of our lifetimes, that's going to happen. And that has a meaningful economic and sociological effect on the state of California moving forward. And I want to not undersell the importance of that, and the importance of continuing to do the good work that staff is doing and the PAW is doing to try and develop other alternatives, because otherwise I don't think the future is particularly bright on that front. So I will, I'll step off my soapbox, Morgan. Thanks again. I thought you did a great job in the presentation. Look forward to continue working with you.
Okay, any other CAC member comments?
Through the chair, I see no indication of member comments, additional member comments.
All right, let's go to the...
1 second, it looks like Mr. Rios has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just want to support Chris and his comments. Very important. I agree with what he said.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. At this time, we'll go to the public.
Through
Any
the
public
chair?
comment on phone? Oh, yes.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button there real quickly. I also concur with Chris in more ways than he knows.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to the public. Any public comment?
Through the chair, I see no indication of public comment.
All right, great. Morgan, thank you again very, very much for a good presentation, a very complex issue. And I'm sure the district and industry and everybody will keep working to try to figure this thing in a positive direction to keep our industries here, we hope. So thank you again. Samir, any comment?
No, I think this is definitely something that we'll be coming back to the CAC as continually suggested by Chris and others. So appreciate the comments as well.
Great, thank you. Now we'll go to item number 12, 617. Comments or a presentation by Jessica. Go for it, young lady.
Yes, thank you very much. I will keep it brief. My name is Jessica Olson. I'm the Director of Community Strategies and Resources here at the district, and I'm here to provide my monthly update on AB 617 implementation. As you know, we are operating in 4 communities throughout the valley. Our most recent community of Arvin Lamont has a community emissions reduction program we are working to develop with the community steering committee members. That is due to the governing board in June, and we've recently met several times with that steering committee to start to brainstorm SERP ideas. That includes emissions and exposure reductions measures that would be included in that document that we would then take before our board in June. And as I updated you last time, that June date is actually an extension. We're just taking more time to work together. It's otherwise a very, very, very tight time frame to get these large documents developed with the members. Other than that, we have 3 other steering committees that have already adopted SERPs. They're in various stages of implementation. Shafter and Fresno were adopted a couple of years ago, so we're almost about halfway through implementation, which is incredible. And in Stockton, we are kind of entering our 2nd year of implementation. We meet with those steering committees continually, monthly, virtually, to implement all the different measures there, and have subcommittees that also meet more frequently to kind of dive into all of the implementation details. So I'm definitely happy to provide any updates or answer any questions if folks have specific questions. But otherwise, all of the information on tracking all the measure progress is located on our website, which is valleyair.org/community. And then, of course, SERP implementation is one piece of AB 617, but the other half of AB 617 in all of our communities is the development of community air monitoring programs. And so that's smaller air monitoring networks in each of these communities. We are fully deployed in Shafter and in Fresno, and in Stockton, we're making a lot of great progress. We now have 3 monitors that are deployed, providing real-time air quality information, and are continuing to work with landowners to deploy even more. So that's always a constant update and constant collaboration with that community to get those deployed. Other than that, I'm here to take any questions, but with that, I'll pass it to Cassie over at CARB to provide the CARB update.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the invitation. I as well have a very quick update. So mine is more of a calendar update on upcoming events. So I'll first go to what has recently happened. So on February 10th, CARB's board selected 2 new communities, East Oakland and the International Border Communities. And so those are the 2 communities that we're moving forward with this year. So moving forward, the next big meeting that I want to highlight is that we have our next consultation group meeting on April 1st. And at that meeting, we will be discussing chapters 5 and 6 of the People's Blueprint, which is really focused on the process, the community selection process and air monitoring. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight that CARB will be presenting to our board in May on the update of our statewide strategy, talking about the build out of the program. Thanks.
Okay, great. Any comment from or questions by the CAC members?
Through the chair, I see no indication of member comment on this item.
All right.
Sorry.
Great, let's go to,
Kelly
Through the
Demi.
chair.
Kelly?
Sorry. Yeah, can she
Go ahead,
run by
Kelly.
thank you, sir. Can she tell the new selections again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry. It is East Oakland and then the International Border Community, which are communities down near the Mexico border down near San Diego.
So it's just all of the communities along the border from the ocean to Arizona?
No, there's a small portion of communities. I could give you more information. I could also drop a link on the staff report. We have maps and such up on our website that will outline the exact preliminary borders of where that community is. The borders aren't finalized yet, but preliminary borders.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that link and knowing exactly where you're talking about down there. Thank you.
Yeah, Michelle, maybe we can give that to all the CAC members. That would be great. Okay, thank you. Okay, again, is there any comment left of CAC members?
Through the chair, I see no member comments nor any public comments on this item.
Okay, great. Thank you again very much. Jamie Holt. Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Hello, how are you, Manuel?
Fine.
Good morning, Heather.
Good
Hi.
afternoon. I apologize for the overtime, but please go
Yes,
ahead.
I'll be brief as well. I understood. I'm sitting in here on behalf of Jamie Holt for the Outreach and Communications Update. Thank you so much for allowing me to give this. Actually, as you heard from Samir, we have been busy with wrapping up wood burning season. He talked about that at the beginning of the meeting and a lot of outreach and effort around that. We are also, it's springtime and it's Earth Day time. So we're very excited to be back out in the world this year. A lot of amazing community events coming our way. A very busy outreach team in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So if you've got stuff that you think we should be at, please send communication our way and we will do our best. And also just want to let you know what Todd was talking about. We are working on a pretty big campaign messaging the Alternative to Agriculture open burning program. And we've got multilingual radio that's actually currently running or starting here in the next few weeks that will be in multiple languages and just pushing that message as best we can.
Manuel, if I could just jump in at the tail end of this update
Please.
I want to make sure it's clear and for the record and just express our appreciation to the Valley residents for their work actually during that residential wood burning season. So we do the education and the outreach, we call the no burn days and all that. And it's really the residents who I think continually have been learning about the health impacts and trying to find ways to not burn, when they can. And with the rising prices, natural gas prices and everything else, is something that, as we talk about this program into the future, we always just have to be aware of the fact that, that residents are the key to trying to continue to reduce burning, residential wood burning. And so I just want to, just a big shout out and appreciation to the residents for continuing to work with us to try to make that strategy a success and continually into the future as well. So, and thanks to Heather and her team
agreed.
for being a key part of that,
Very good point.
that ongoing work.
Great. Thank you very, very much, both. And yeah, I think the public has, with your efforts, though, the public has had a great opportunity of getting the latest equipment for their homes and the cooperation. I mean, I hear all about these fireplaces being replaced and total collaboration. Again, this district, I wouldn't train it for any other district staff at all in the 33 other air districts. So, but again, thank you very much. Any comments, questions, CAC members?
Through the chair, I see no indication of member comments
About the public?
and no public comments.
Great. Not great, but thank you. Sorry about that. Let's go to item number 14, CAC member comments. At this time, only for items of whatever you wish to bring up. Please, at this time, go for it.
And through the chair, I see no indication of public or member comments, excuse me, on this item.
Okay, great. And that pertains only to the CAC members, so we don't have to go to the public. Great. We'll be happy to, again, have the presentation to the board. We'll be happy to do that. Again, I want to thank all of the CAC members for their 10 minutes after 12. I apologize. We had some pretty good items of complexity. And again, thank the staff. Thank you, Samir, and the board for working, and also the EJAG group of coming together and getting its folks also elected to the committee. So again, staff, thank you for all that hard work. At this time, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Everybody have a safe week and be safe, please.
Bye.